This week on Groundworks, we're going to break down the seasonality of different food sources, from greens to grains, natural food sources out there, acorns, things like that, how that impacts the strategies throughout the season, when each food source or food type is most attractive, and we're going to break that all down, and hopefully that'll help you this season as we wrap out the year. So early in the season, what we see most, the highly attractive food plots or food sources that we see is definitely our perennials. So our clover systems, for illusion, it's the easy green perennial mix. We also see a lot of attraction with just natural food sources, from acorns to browse out in the field, those forbs that the deer are feeding on. When you can pair up water with those highly attractive food sources like the acorns and these easy greens, that's definitely a deadly combination during that time of the year. Now, as we enter the season, some of the food sources that we really key in on, again, our easy green system with the clover and chicory. We also up here in the Midwest have a lot of soybeans, high protein, great green food source that lasts for those first few weeks of the season. Those are two of the things that we really key on. And then we begin to see transition into our brassica systems. So the deer now like to forage on the tops of some of those brassicas. On our primetime mix, it's the ones that don't necessarily have the bulbs, it's mostly the growth up top. And what we see with this transition, a lot of times we actually plant test plots where it's a single perennial mix on one side and a full brassica mix on the other side, and we just let the deer choose what they like. And that really tells us when they begin to transition from those perennials into those annual brassicas. Another thing you could do, in what we've actually designed the 4 seasons food plot around, is we combine both of those together. So it's what we call our wraparound food plot system, where you get some of the perennials that pull in from summer to early fall. Brassicas sustain those deer later in the season, fall, winter, and it wraps around to the next season in the spring where the perennials come back. And as we transition from this early season hunting period into the peak season hunting period, we see a lot of transition or shifting on what the deer prefer from a food source standpoint. What we see around here in the Midwest is the bulbs start to get eaten on these brassicas. Corn comes into play, standing grain, a great food source. Corn and brassicas together is a deadly combination. A lot of times what we do is we actually broadcast some of our mixes right into the corn rows if they're spaced wide enough, or along the edge. So, giving deer everything they need in one spot has always been a very advantageous strategy for us across the board from season to season. Now, throughout the season, a lot of our strategies are based around food. Deer transitioning to food in the evenings, deer going back to the bed from food in the mornings. During the rut, they're always bouncing around. That's a completely different strategy. Not really food related so much, but any time of the year where food comes into play, which is 90% of the year, it's always a decision of, are the deer gonna go to grain? Are the deer gonna go to greens? Typically when it's warmer conditions, warm fronts, lower pressure, we're going to green. And then when those big cold fronts come in, high pressure systems, maybe a north wind, maybe some snow, that transitions our strategies into trying to hunt more grain. So we either separate them to try to create flow from our microplot system into the standing ag, or we combine them both for the best of both worlds. And then you can hunt one spot where it has grain and green mixed in. And during the rut, whether it's pre-rut, peak rut, post-rut, food is not always the number one draw for an upper age class buck when he's trying to focus on breeding. But what we do from a strategy standpoint is break up these micro plots, have them in different areas, so these deer have to travel, find these doe groups that feel comfortable, and we're separating the deer out basically. So bucks have to travel from food source to food source to food source to try to find the next hot doe, and we try to ambush them in between a lot of times, and not necessarily always on top of the food source. It's more of a social thing, so they'll hit the scrapes on the edge pre-rut and post-rut. During peak rut, when they get off that hot doe, they're trying to find a new one, they'll check out these little micro plots and bounce around from bedding to food to bedding to food. Now, transitioning from the post-rut into late season, but what we see is transition off of the green sources like perennials for the most part, especially when the snow flies and we have 6-12 inches even of snow on the ground. But the brassicas are still highly attractive when there's not too much snow, too much ice on them. So really late season, it's a brassica, it's the prime time that gets a lot of attention from the deer. We film them all the time out there just digging up these turnips, trying to get those bulbs. And when we pair that with standing grain, that's the deadly combination late season. And the later in the season we get, another important thing to factor into late season food is this bedding close by that has some type of food source in it as well. So something thick, woody browse mixed in there. I see a lot of deer eating sumacs, poplars, just any kind of soft mass, whether you did a hinge cut, clear cut, they'll even nibble on cedars if in desperation. But there's a lot of woody browse. If you can pair that up with the late season food, maybe you got that southern slope where they can get some sun, feed in their bed, come to your food source. They're not going to move far late season. This is a deadly combination as we tail out the end of the season. Another benefit of having some of the best food sources for this late season time period is you basically get all the wintering deer. The wintering herd comes to your property, your hunting location, and you'll see a lot more deer, so you can get new bucks. You can also decide, is now a good time to take some does. Late season food's a great tool to use to try to balance your herd out a little bit too. Part of the fun of planting food plots or having all these different types of food source available for the deer, find a lot of shed antlers, and that can be really cool too. So that also gives you a lot of intel on what bucks survived, what you'll be chasing next year. And really this system's just designed to get the best yield out of your food plot. So when a deer has a choice, maybe it's between the green source you planted or the neighbor's green food source, if you have a higher volume of tonnage and nutrition in your plot, hopefully that's going to be the difference in the higher attraction at your hunting spot. For more advanced strategies and tactics, follow along with the Groundwork series at the Deer Society YouTube channel, the free Deer Society app, or at any of the Deer Society social media channels.